Warm good evening after this so-called refreshing break, and we had that networking session also. Thank you very much, Professor Shekhar Shah, for giving me this opportunity to just laying down the format as to what are the expectations, your expectations from the speakers for the session. And at the outset, let me thank the ILDC and specifically Pranabji for inviting me to this conference. Let me confess that this happens to be the very first maiden engagement with ILDC. But nonetheless, I am purely and confess that I am an academician, core academician, not from field, but certainly have interest in laws, practices, and experiences related to women. And if I might add on, I am a Kashmiri by birth, displaced from my native place. So many discussions that happened with reference to land since yesterday have somewhere shaken me to the core that we have been talking about land and its governance. We have been talking about and saying that we need to ask right questions. I'm afraid since yesterday, the sessions that I attended, in each one of them, we were talking about the impact of climate and on the community, and we were talking about vulnerabilities and marginalization. But none of us addressed the issue of gender, that how women cope up with these impacts. So when we are talking about climate change, or we are talking about impact on environment, we are talking about deforestation, we are talking about land grabbing, everywhere, it's all about politics of a kind. And when I say politics, I am very cautiously and with emphasis using that word power. When we say politics, politics is nothing else but power. And power, which is used by the upper segment of the society, those who have that political mileage. And when I say political, political is not necessarily in the sense of governance that we understand in a polity. But when we say power in the political sense within the family, I'm just talking about the one who is the decision maker. So in the context of making decisions with reference to our own lives, as a woman, whether I am able to take and make those decisions or not. So what is the legal framework? What is it that the law is giving me in the form of maybe rights or maybe in the form of power? And let me hurriedly add that from the jurisprudential standpoint, the power and claim are two different dimensions of rights. We do use them as interchangeable synonyms, but they are not. It is the exercise of power that creates a claim. And when we are saying that there is the power, that means that I have the ability to bring about a change in the legal position of the other. So not getting philosophical. I am a female, I am a woman. Do I have the capacity, the legal right to own the property? That's the fundamental question. We do understand and realize, though I had this speech and the address, but I'll just keep it aside, from sheer experience. And I would like to interact with you that whenever we are talking about land governance, does at any point of time women come to the fore? Whenever we are talking about land governance, the picture that comes to our mind is there is either a farmer or a bureaucrat or a politician or some mafia don. So sorry if I am equating them. It's basically some man, a male, who is in the picture, who is visualized. But a female hardly comes to the fore. So that is the kind of attitude, approach, and attitude of our lawmakers also. Despite the fact that we have got many laws, even going by the Constitution, we understand the Constitution does talk about equality. It does talk about fraternity. It does talk about dignity. It does talk about justice. But what is this justice meaning to a woman
who doesn't have the capacity to own the land, who doesn't have the capacity to use the land. These two words again, the capacity to use, the right to use, and the right to own, the two of them have got different aspects to it. The moment we say that I have the right to use the property, that means I cannot dispose of the property, I do not have the title to the property, but for the time being, I am allowed to use that property. But whatever is the product of that property, who is going to utilize that? Who is going to exploit that? So when we are talking about rights, and when we are talking about that narrative that we need to take care of the vulnerable and the marginalized population, 50% of the population which is female, gendered perspective to land governance. And when we say gender inclusivity, have we made any baby steps? Are we taking any baby steps? That's the question that we should be also asking about and from, and that is what I just saw in that small clipping, that documentary that you showed of Professor Huck, wherein he was saying that we need to look into the gender aspect and gender inclusivity with reference to land governance also. Whenever there is a marriage, there is some stridhan given to the lady. There is some dowry given to the lady. We understand there is the law, Dowry Prohibition Act 1961. But what is the practical impact? Has anybody bothered about it? Has it been able to control the menace of dowry? Why are we not thinking on the lines of not dowry, but some property being given in the form of some land, some patta to the woman? It doesn't come to us. It doesn't occur to us. Why? Because this is something, the property is to be owned by the menfolk. So that understanding has to now shift. We need to, on such platforms, talk about not only what is happening generally in land, but also with reference to the fact that though there are policies in place, but how they are being implemented and executed. Nobody can deny the fact that land has a significant role with reference to a dignified living of a woman. Like it has some place, it has got a major place in the life of a male, similarly it also happens to have a similar significant place in the life of a woman also. But the fact of the matter remains, we do not acknowledge it. And when we are talking about land, land does give you the security. It does give you that capacity to make a decision, to live the life the way you want to. So it is, in fact, an attitude that we need to bring in our legal framework. So whenever we are talking about land governance, we need to understand and ensure that the land governance as such should include a specific segment and percentage, which is clearly reserved for women. We all understand and know the kind of reservation we happen to experience with reference to Women Reservation Bill, the representation of women in the parliament, wherein they have to make the decision. But even at the local block level, when we are saying Panchayati Raj, the session was somewhere talking about Panchayati Raj, and at the local block level, there are the Panchayat, and there are the Panchas, the Sarpanch, wherever there is a Mahila Sarpanch, whether she is the one who makes the decision, or the decision is made by her husband. So when we are talking about these capacities, somewhere the laws have been put in place, but how are they being implemented? So it is you and me put together who have to work together to bring about a change in our aptitude and attitude with reference to how we empower the decision-making capability of women. So until and unless we recognize the power to be given to a woman who is within our family, we will not be able to think about equality. We did have various sessions wherein we were talking about Auron nahi to vote nahi, housing for all, and we were talking about affordability, availability, and viability. Now, who suffers the most adverse impact whenever there is any impact because of climate change, because of migration. If you are talking about economic policies and post-1991, we all understand that because of that liberalization, LPGs, we understand that a lot of migration has happened. And because of that migration, we all understand our rural belt, our agricultural land is being tilled by women folk alone. Men folk have moved away and out from their rural spaces to urban spaces in finding for new jobs, newer opportunities, greener pastures. So back at their own homes, women are tilling the soil. Despite the fact that they are the ones who are tilling the soil, the land is not there in their name. The title is not in their name. So in case the husband passes away, who utilizes that property? Who can decide as to what crop is to be cultivated? They are the ones who are locally, indigenously aware of the kind of temperature, the soil, the kind of crop they need to, and the viability of those crops and the economics underlying that. But they cannot decide because they do not have the title to the property, and because they have lost their partners, they are not the ones who are the decision makers. Forget about being the decision makers, they are thrown out of their lands. So that becomes a cycle of throwing women into poverty, into destitution, making them dependent, and then we are talking about economic empowerment and empowerment of women generally per se. I'm afraid that if we are not taking care of the 50% of the population with reference to incapacitating them through these laws, we have 2005 amendment to Hindu Succession Act, wherein we talk about that, yes, the Hindu daughter has been made the co-partner. We are all aware what is the ground reality. She is the co-partner, no doubt about it. Section 14 says that, yes, she is not anymore only the limited owner, she is the absolute owner of the property which is given to her, which vests in her, provided the father during his lifetime gives it away to her. Once the father passes away, alas, what is the ground reality? What is the practical situation? How many of us are inclined to ask for our share from our brothers? Let us introspect. And if we are not inclined to, who all are responsible for that? Are we, the women, responsible for that? Or men folk have equal responsibility to ensure that the attitudes change? With reference to even the statutory rights being there, this is the tradition that ladki ki shaadi ho gayi, that's the time that we are giving the property, and then she moves away. She has got no stake, no claim in the property, despite the fact there is a law which in 2005 says that the woman has the right to own the property, provided the father gives it away during his lifetime, or even if he dies intestate. But similar situation is there in tribal areas also. The property is inherited not by females, but males. So once the property is inherited by the females, by the males and not females, where is the standing, where is the right, where is the power, where is that security, where is that entitlement, which is ideally to be created in favor of women in the name of the preamble of the Constitution? 75 years down the line, we are still not in a position and situation wherein with the laws we say that yes, now there is the level playing field. So equality of opportunity and equality of status still is a far-fetched dream for Indian women. I, in the beginning, made a statement. I understand that I am overshooting my time. I am a Kashmiri. If I happen to marry a non-Kashmiri, I do not remain a domicile of Kashmir. And I'm afraid if I am not a domicile of Kashmir, I cannot purchase property there. So what happens to my right? right to purchase property out of my own earnings. Sorry, I've got no right, because I am not considered anymore a domicile of Kashmir because I've married outside of the Kashmir community. Similar to the situation with reference to Himachal Pradesh. So somewhere we need to brainstorm and think on these lines also. There was a discussion yesterday happening in a session with reference to policy and law, that policy is first and policy cannot overstep law. I'm afraid it's the other way around. Despite the fact that you might frame many policies, if there is a law which does not give effect to your policy and it arm twists the policy, the law prevails. Policy doesn't, and policy goes in the backyards and under the carpet. So what matters is first having a sound legal framework and then the implementation of the same. And at this moment, let me also conclude by saying that only having laws won't help. We have the SDG target 2030. We have the goal 5, which talks about gender equality. There are people from Planning Commission, there are people from Niti Aayog who are better placed to comment on that achievement of target and where we have landed ourselves in 2024, just 6 years from the deadline. I'm afraid. Yes, there is improvement. There are the statistics available on the NFHS website, National Family Health Survey website, which says that yes, the share of women in acquiring and holding property has increased, but there is still a long way to go. So when we are talking about land governance, vulnerabilities, marginalization, irrespective of the fact whether we are talking about rural or urban spaces, we first need to talk about women as equal partners, because they are everywhere across, whether it is an urban space or a rural space. And yes, when I mentioned 2005 legislation, I'm sorry to inform you that 2005 amendment does make woman a co-partner, but it somewhere has very smartly taken away the concept of agricultural land, which was earlier there. The woman doesn't have a right to own and get that agricultural land. So, कहने को तो बहुत अच्छा लगता है that woman has become a co-partner, but when it comes to land, property, power, the woman is not there on the podium. Thank you very much for giving me the podium to give expression to my views. Thank you very much.